Victor Charles was going to another location with his one-man show at California Lutheran College in Thousand Oaks, California on September 26, 1974. Soon thereafter, he was performing in the production of Visit to a Small Planet at the Coachlight Dinner Theater. It was a comedy, and it was written by Gore Fidel. He played in the role of Cretin, and naturally he had to be the oddity in the play of being visitor from another planet. Finally, Hollywood had the good sense to cast Victor Charles in a classic 90-minute television series of The Lives of Benjamin Franklin in the episode of The Ambassador, in regards to the historic experiences of Benjamin Franklin in France. It starred Eddie Albert as Benjamin Franklin when he was at the age of 72 years old. Victor Charles plays the role of King George III. Nearing the end of 1974, on November 22nd, Victor Charles was being interviewed by writer Maribel Levis, and these are a few of Victor Charles's words that he happily spoke about how people perceive those who are obese. Fat means self-indulgent, weak, lacking in self-respect, and pride, and greedy, especially greedy. I like being the center of attention when I was on stage, but not when I'm eating my dinner. If you lose weight, you'll lose your career. My talent is not in my fat. It just happens to be the package in which the product is bundled. My fatness doesn't affect me physically because I don't expect it to. I used to worry about my health until I realized my grandmother lived 87 happy fat years. Doctors with their 5 gallons of amphetamines, it ruined my timing, which is crucial. Of course, I'm not advocating fat. And if you're fat and it worries you and you feel guilty about it, then it's bad for you. Being thin is where it's been. Being fat is where it's at. The entire time I lived with my Uncle Victor Charles in Encino, California in 1965, there was never a conversation about his weight. Not from him or my Grandma Mert, his brother David Francis, or my Uncle Tony. It was never an issue when being around him, because he was just my Uncle Victor Charles, who was quite tall but never fat to me. On November 28, 1974, our lovely daughter, Alexis, was born. We still were living at Utah Street in North Park near Balboa Park and the Old Globe Theater. I was still watching Indian Magic in Zero Gardens, and I still was performing in street theater skits. When looking back on 1974, I was entering into the world of performing arts, and it was my humble beginning of becoming an actor. Soon, in 1975, I said my goodbyes to the members of Indian Magic, and I took my young family to Albuquerque, New Mexico. I never imagined Sam Woods' Indian Magic would eventually become the professional San Diego Repertory Theater in downtown San Diego. Looking back, if I had not left San Diego to New Mexico, I might have been part of their great theater success as well, but that is only a wishful maybe, but fate had other plans for me when I would eventually meet my mentor, Martin Garish. Victor Charles started off in 1975 by performing his one-man show, It Could Be Verse, at the University of Wisconsin. He soon was performing in the television program The Odd Couple in the episode of the rent strike, starring Tony Randell as Felix and Jacques Kledman as Oscar, and Victor Charles was playing in the role of Mr. Lovelace on January 26, 1975. On January 28, 1975, Victor Charles was performing in the television program The Lives of Benjamin Franklin, titled The Statesman, in the role of King George III. The executive producer was Louis Friedman. One day later, on January 29, 1975, Victor Charles was performing his one-man show, It Could Be Verse, at the Mabel Tainter Memorial with his poetry and prose. He also read from the Bible and introduced other classic authors from the past. This creative activity was a major success of allowing audiences to see and hear his good human nature instead of being a villain on television and in motion pictures. On February 7, 1975, Victor Charles was in the television program Con, starring John Arlen and Joe Cape. Later on, in July 31st, 1975, he was performing in the stage production of The Cooch Dancer starring Edie Adams, and it was written by John Kendley. Victor Charles played in the role of Sir John, who ate insects, snakes, and mice alive, giving you the idea that it was a corrupted circus carny that was completely bizarre. In a newspaper review, this one sentence describes it all. Cooch Dancer will never win a medal for theater, but its final curtain wins a deserved round of applause for its verisimilitude. I agree what theater critic Tom McEllish wrote in his stunning and stinging review of The Cooch Dancer. Not because I saw the production, which I never have, but I applaud his courage and honesty to write what he saw and heard. I, too, was a theater critic for 11 years, and if you ever want to be respected, you have to write it like it is, and not blow smoke and flatteries up to you know where to be loved. Unfortunately, for my Uncle Victor Charles, he once again chose a real stinker to be in, and following into his next production, Camelot, in Los Angeles, California, it would be his last performance in 1975. On September 4th, 1975, Victor Charles was performing in Camelot at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles, California, and starring Robert Goulet and Carol Lawrence. Critic-writer Dan Sullivan described the quality of the production in one small paragraph. As theater, forget it. Those who don't know Camelot, in any other version, you will have to take it on faith that this was once a musical for grown-ups. The attempt was to tell a romantic legend in a rueful modern way that would start you thinking about people in legends and people as they really are. It didn't quite work. Earnestness kept colliding with impishness, but there were many lovely and sensitive things in it and some good laughs too. Camelot had lots of problems, but it also had a lot of class. Two stinkers going back to back can be very damaging for an actor's confidence and career, and my Uncle Victor Charles had to face that reality not once, but many times before. He most likely tossed the two faltering productions onto the bonfire, had a good chuckle, and probably said, "Oh, well, what will I act in tomorrow?" It was one day before Thanksgiving, and it probably was Victor Charles's favorite day of the year, when the turkey was cooking in the oven and mashed potatoes and thick gravy was soon placed on the magnificent dressed table with olives and sweet pickles in crystal bowls on that glorious day of the year. He most likely didn't see it coming his way that would slightly ruin his day, and it was publicly announced in newspapers reading, "Actor Victor Buono is recovering from a broken shoulder bone suffered when he slipped in the shower, friends say." His shoulder bone, unfortunately, didn't heal as fast as he wanted, and the Old Globe Theatre had to cancel their production of the last of the Marx Brothers writers. My Uncle Victor Charles was now 36 years old, and he would have numerous stage, television, and motion picture productions waiting for him up the road. When he thought over his dismal year of 1975, though, he most likely dropped to his knees, promising and begging, "If there is a God of theatre, please redeem me from the abyss of the stench of Gucci and Camelot." My Uncle Victor Charles was performing in the television program Ellery Queen in the episode of Two-Faced Woman on February 29, 1976, starring Lillian McGraw, John Hillerman, Forrest Tucker, and Vera Miles. Then, on May 2, 1976, he spoke bluntly within a newspaper of his experience of performing in Danny Thomas's television program, The Practice, in the episode Jules and the Bum, saying, "I've grown somewhat weary of playing villains, and I enjoy doing comedy for a change. I've been a professional writer in movies and on TV for nearly 15 years. In that time, I personally murdered about 100 people, and I'd been directly or indirectly responsible for the untimely demise of many more. My general history of robbery and terror makes Genghis Khan look like Mary Poppins. I'm absolutely convinced that one's nature determines the type of role he will be permitted to play. If one is unable to see his shoelaces while standing up, he's a bad guy. No doubt that's why villains are called heavies. Every villain wants to do comedy. Fortunately, I'm physically and as well endowed for one as the other. People always laugh when I walk in. So I murder people 6 months out of the year, then spend 6 months trying to make people laugh. I'm not a villain or a comedian. I'm an actor. I like to play humans, and humans are a composite of both comedy and tragedy. The roles I have the most fun with are a mixture of both elements. He just couldn't shake loose from playing bad guys in television and motion pictures, and it is true he was typecast due to his weight. If finances were never a problem in his life, I strongly believe he would have remained acting only on the stage. His old friend, Jonathan McMurtry, met him at the Oak Globe Theatre in San Diego, California in the early 1960s, and McMurtry remained acting there for over 50 years in approximately 200 productions. Victor Charles made more money than McMurtry between the years of 1961 to 1981, but as for personal accomplishments and peace of mind, it's McMurtry who wins the bout. This was the price Victor Charles had to pay to make a living as an actor in Hollywood. He knew what he was doing, but he couldn't do it in the way he hoped, because the Hollywood mill only wants actors that want fortune and fame, and often many lose their souls in the bargain. On May 8, 1976, Victor Charles was performing in the television program Brenda Starr in the episode Kiss Me, Kill Me, starring Jill St. John and Stella Stevens. 7 days later, on May 15, 1976, he was performing in the 90-minute television program High Risk, and he had a few thoughts to say. If you put a paisley shawl over the Matterhorn, it's going to look like a paisley shawl over the Matterhorn. Of course, I don't mind talking about my weight. I can't very well hide it. I have physical examinations at regular intervals, and my doctors go away mumbling to themselves at how healthy I am. I can think thin, and I can act thin. I suppose I've something in common with Al Hurt, Francis Sullivan, and Sebastian Cabot. Subby is a good friend of mine, and quite often I'm asked for autographs from people who think I'm him. I tell them there are about 2 feet and 100 pounds difference. Why should it be? There are fat everything, good guys, bad guys, cowboys and Indians. I do all the talk shows. I have an open-end invitation on the Tonight Show. I like to keep my face before the public. It's like having a publicity man without paying for one. Victor Charles was performing in the television program Eyeless on October 27, 1976. He soon was performing in the television program The Tony Randall Show in the episode Case, the Ego Affair on November 11, 1976. In a newspaper on November 23, 1976, it was announced that he was cast in the stage production of The Guardsman. Looking back on 1976, there wasn't any spectacular productions of notice for Victor Charles, but he was a working actor in Hollywood, playing his roles the way the directors wanted. He was now 37 years old, and I can only imagine what he must have been thinking about in his future, in the night, all alone. Starting the year in 1977, it appeared Victor Charles didn't have any one-man shows of prose and poetry booked at any universities and ladies' clubs throughout America. The cause of this might have been difficulties in booking performances, or because he was totally exhausted by all of the traveling that he had done before. For whatever the reason is, I wasn't able to find any evidence or explanation saying otherwise. On March 18, 1977, Victor Charles was performing in the stage production The Man Who Came to Dinner at the Country Dinner Theater in Florida. He had a few thoughts about the play he was in that was written by George Kaufman and Moss Hart, who structured their comedy after their dear friend Alexander Woollcott, who was a professional Broadway critic. This is what Victor Charles said. Look at the sky. Imagine taking directions from somebody who comes in wearing Clarence the Clown on his T-shirt. Woollcott howled with delight since it's been done by every high school in the world. Victor Charles performed in the television program The Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew Mysteries, and the episode A Haunting We Will Go on March 31st, 1977. Victor Charles was performing in the television program Man from Atlantis, and he commented, "One of the things I like about Man from Atlantis is that there are no guns, no knives, and no gratuitous violence. There is some rough stuff, of course, but not with recognizable weapons. I am not anti-gun, but I am anti-handgun. A rifle was invented for shooting long distances in order to acquire food. A handgun was devised to kill human beings at short range. I recently came across a photograph of myself at 8, and I was heavy even then. It never bothered me, though when I got up to 350 pounds a while back, I felt fat for the first time. Victor Charles was one of the principal actors in the television program Man from Atlantis, and these are the 5 episodes in 1977 with him playing in the role of Mr. Schubert. Meltdown on September 22nd, 1977. The Mud Room on October 13, 1977. Hank of Moo on October 18, 1977, Man of War on November 1st, 1977, and The Crystal Water Sudden Death on November 22nd, 1977. It wasn't very often that my Uncle Victor Charles had a principal role in a television program series. He had the Batman series playing King Tut in the mid-1960s, and in the late 1970s it was Man from Atlantis. Both King Tut and Mr. Schubert were mentally distorted villains, but he gave those 2 roles the old Buono genius of throwing his pursing wit and chuckling amusement. On December 22, 1977, Victor Charles was publicly announced in newspapers that he was going to play in the role of Jimmy Bryce in the stage production of The Last of the Marx Brothers Writers at the Solari Theater in Beverly Hills, California, and the date of its opening was scheduled for January 10, 1978. Victor Charles ended the year of 1977 by being one of the guests on Severson's The Sounds of Christmas Eve on December 24, 1977. This particular Christmas television event was with Severson, Henry Mancini, and Victor Charles, and was aired on every future December 24th throughout the decade of the 1970s. The clock was ticking, and my Uncle Victor Charles continued working in television, motion pictures, and on theater stages. At the beginning of 1978, my wife, our 3 children, and me were still living in Glendale, California, and I was working at the Pantages Theater in their tickets department on Hollywood Boulevard. I soon contacted Victor Charles about attending the Solari Theater to see him playing the role of Jimmy Bryce in The Last of the Marx Brothers Writers. When I arrived there and sat in the seats to the far right, I looked to my left and I saw comic actor Marty Feldman sitting in the middle of the theater that evening. On January 5, 1978, Victor Charles was in an article written by Wayne Erreca, and Victor Charles had a few words to share, saying, I'm staying at a friend's house in Hollywood. The place is lovely, all overgrown with morning glories and junkies. Every morning as I shaved, I looked out the window at the lovely trees. This morning they were all gone. It turns out I was looking at a tree rental lot for the studios. There is a sense of impertinence here, wouldn't you say? He also said in regards to the nature of the play, kind of like a pie stuck in the heart. It's a very funny play about a very sad man. We planned to do it at the Oak Globe Theater 3 years ago, but I broke my shoulder. Then we started rehearsals and Groucho died. Good Lord, we all said, is the public going to think this is the crassest kind of commercialism, if there is such a thing? It's a marvelous house, and it was all built by actors. That means it'll probably fall down any day now. Hurry up and get your tickets. It needs a small theater, and it is a very fine play. I think Louis Phillips is a major playwright. I'm the first to play Jimmy Bryce, and the large men everywhere are going to be eternally grateful. Each act starts off with a 10 or 15-minute monologue. The first few days in San Diego after I gotten off the book, I thought I'd died and gone to a Screenwriters Guild meeting. Very little sense took place. I'm devoting all the time necessary to take the show where it's going. We'll take it to San Francisco next, and maybe even New York, though it isn't necessary to go to New York anymore because the theater is in so many other places now. Later, in the early 1990s, I had the opportunity to have a conversation with director Craig Knoll about my Uncle Victor Charles while we stood outside talking at the Oak Globe Theater. He recalled how they hoped the last of the Marx Brothers writers would have made it all the way to New York, saying, "That's what Victor needed in order to be known at every kitchen table in America, but unfortunately it didn't go any further." I sensed that legendary Craig Knoll at the moment still had a broken heart for both of them by not succeeding with that production. He also mentioned to me that he didn't believe Victor would live a long life, because he always did everything big by buying big cigars, eating big meals, and never stopping to rest his big stature. I was grateful that day when Craig Knoll was completely candid with me about how he saw Victor Charles's life. He was like a broken-hearted father looking back on his lost son, and I knew Craig Knoll loved Victor Charles very much. On January 23, 1979, Victor Charles had to postpone his performance of his one-man show at the Muskegon College due to an accident he recently had. This doesn't appear to be a positive beginning for the year of 1979. On February 28, 1979, Victor Charles was cast in the television program Super Train in the role of Misto and other stars like Rove Thimes, Bill Barty, and Scott Brady. And on March 19, 1979, he was on the Johnny Carson Show with Phyllis Newman, Ed McMahon, and opera singer Beverly Seals. He had an open invitation on Johnny Carson's show whenever he wanted to recite his new poems or show off his new knitted hats that his mother Myrtle Bell made for him. To this very day, I'm envious of my dear cousin Vicky when she had the privilege of sitting with Johnny Carson and her Uncle Victor Charles when they dined in a restaurant after filming his television show. Victor Charles was in the television program Darn You Harry Landers on April 7th, 1979, and he was performing on the television program The Return of the Mod Squad on May 17, 1979. He soon was cast in another stage production titled Moore's Dracula at the Stage West in Alberta, Canada. A theater critic commented on his performance, saying, "Victor Buono, star of so much in the fields of legit and recorded theater, is the star of the show, and yet he isn't. Apart from his noteworthy bulk, He doesn't impose himself on the production. Much of his acting is positively soft and confidentially voiced. It's his restless, quivering body and his fluttering finger that tell you he is an eager explorer of the unknown. His passion for a triumph over the devil is perhaps best expressed by a repeated small gesture, that of putting a finger in his mouth. It makes the almost obsessed Van Helsing incredibly enduring. On August 27, 1979, Victor Charles's mother died. She was 69 years old. She was my Grandma Mert, and she had been galvanized in my heart and mind ever since she left us. She was a very strong woman, and she said everything without hesitation, and she never held back what she truly thought. I can't imagine the pain my Uncle Victor Charles felt by losing her. For his entire life, she was always standing by his side, supporting him and loving him. They shared the same roofs for 40 years together, waking up in the mornings, drinking hot coffee, and eating her delicious meals throughout the days and nights. I believe Victor Charles's loss of his mother was never filled by any other, and the vacant hole in his heart was never patched of his grief for the rest of his life. She was the most important woman in his entire life. Victor Charles was performing in the television program Better Late Than Never, starring Harry Morgan, Harold Gould, and Donald Pleasance, on October 15, 1979. The storyline about the production had to do with elder people trying to get along. Victor Charles said, "What's wrong with the word old? Why do we refuse to use perfectly good words? There's nothing wrong with the word fat, and there's nothing wrong with old. I thought I'd be old at age 60. To me, 40 is just a short size. I think it's ridiculous to fight against aging. You can no more stop the aging process than you can stop going to the bathroom. And if you try, something's going to explode." Another decade had come and gone for my Uncle Victor Charles. He survived the wild, progressive 1970s of the Vietnam War, Roe versus Wade, the hippie nation, and President Nixon's Watergate almost impeachment affair. My Uncle Victor Charles started in the beginning of 1980 in a barrage of being in television programs that were not reviewed very kindly. There wasn't any classic A-grade productions waiting for him, and most of them were silly plots and with buffoonery characters that he would have to play. Victor Charles was in the television program Matt and Jenny, titled Mystery of the Pikes, on March 28, 1980. He played the role of Hezekiah Pike, and the producer was William Davison. Victor Charles was performing in the television movie Murder Can Hurt You on May 18, 1980, starring Jamie Farr, Connie Stevens, and Victor Charles, playing in the role of Chief Ironbottom. He shared a few describing words about the production, saying, "It's pure, unadulterated force, and I think it's survived the improvements, if they attempted any. A show like this with a handful of good comics can be real dangerous. We tend to try to get laughs ourselves. We were trading gags, trying any piece of business that, if it didn't work for ourselves, we'd offer to anybody, and I don't hesitate to say, with love. Every single one, and if anyone is offended, I'll be shocked. We did a job on all of them. We worked hard as professionals to do things we've been trained never ever to do. I did the quimquak that should set art back 500 years. Until you've been given McLeod's watermelon, you haven't lived. Life is a hollow mockery until you've seen Jamie Farr's Carmen Miranda hat. If they put on screen everything that we do on film, it would last 12 hours. It was a case of we didn't always stop when they said cut. At the beginning of 1981, Victor Charles was performing in the motion picture Target Earth on February 1st, 1981. And 7 days later, on February 8th, 1981, he was performing in the television movie Judgment Day, starring Barry Sullivan, Roddy McDowall, and Victor Charles was playing the role of Mr. Heavener. On March 8, 1981, Victor Charles was a guest on the Johnny Carson Show with Connie Stevens and Barron Allen. He soon performed again in the television Vegas in 2 episodes, The Killing on April 15, 1981, and The Seek and Destroy on April 22, 1981. On May 17, 1981, Victor Charles's father, Victor Francis Buono, died at the age of 73 years old. My step-grandfather's death left a great vacuum in the heart of Victor Charles's life. Both of his parents were now gone, and he was only 43 years old. I strongly believe he performed over the years for his mother Myrtle Bell and his father Victor Francis to make them proud of his many acting accomplishments. In the end, with him now gone, and with all his sorrows and wrongdoings now could be forgiven, because his life had glorious chapters as being a police officer, Bill's bondsman, and most importantly, he was the loving father of Victor Charles Buono. New Year's Eve for Victor Charles in 1981 was different, because it was the first time that he and his younger brother, David Francis, were without his mother Myrtle Bell and father Victor Francis. He drove from Apple Valley to Lakewood, where David and his wife Patty and their 3 children lived near Long Beach, California. They had a wonderful dinner together, with Patty making everyone feeling comfortable and being pleasantly filled to the brim from her delicious meal and sweet dessert. They sat in the family room by the fireplace talking about the past years, when growing up, and they laughed about family episodes over the numerous years of living with Granny Grunts, Auntie Susie, Aunt Mary Jane, my father Sonny, Uncle Tony, and their mother Myrtle Bell and father Victor Francis Buono. The clock ticked to midnight, and it was now 12:01 a.m., and it was now January 1st, 1982. My Uncle David begged his brother Victor Charles to stay overnight, but he insisted that he needed to return back to his home in Apple Valley. David tried to have him change his mind, but Victor Charles was determined to make the long drive that night in the dark to his home. While he drove, I'm sure he thought over the many memories of his mother and father. And I believe he knew he had lost something inside, because his two very best fans were now gone forever. I was working at a radio station as a disc jockey in Petoskey, Michigan at WWPZ 1340, and when I entered the building on the morning of January 1st, 1982, I went to the AP, the Associated Press, ticker, to pull off some of the morning top stories for the day. When I entered into the recording room and started reading the news clippings, I suddenly stopped after reading actor Victor Buono collapses, dies at 43. Needless to say, I was absolutely stunned. And I immediately called my father Sonny that morning. He verified what I just read, and he too was in a fog of Victor Charles's death only at a short time after New Year's Eve, when he returned to his house in Apple Valley, California. On January 2nd, 1982, Victor Charles was in the Gazette newspaper in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and it printed. He was 43. Buono, who weighed nearly 400 pounds, apparently collapsed after celebrating the New Year with his brother, David Buono, of Lakewood, California, earlier in the day. A caretaker, Richard Martinez, found his body lying on the dining room floor when he returned from a party at 4 a.m. Buono was taking medication for back pain, he added. Buono was born in San Diego, February 3rd, 1938. To this very day, the final conclusion of my Uncle Victor Charles's life, when dying at only 43 years old, is hard to accept, because he had so much more to give to the world. Just yesterday, when looking through past newspaper clippings when the Old Globe Theater main stage was burnt down to the ground on March 8, 1978, Victor Charles had performed there in the production of The Last of the Marx Brothers writers on October 21st, 1977. In 1978, Victor Charles received a brown wooden and golden metal plaque printing San Diego Press Club, headliner of 1978, Victor Buono, Entertainment. I have that wonderful plaque of his, and it is hanging on my office wall, and I will always cherish it and the memories of when I lived with my Uncle Victor Charles in Encino, California. Victor Charles was one of the celebrities who came to help the Old Globe Theater to rebuild their destroyed theater. When being interviewed, he simply said, It was my home. It was where he first realized that he could act with all of the other great actors of the world. It was Granny Grunt's director Craig Knoll, costumer Peggy Kellner, and Father John R. Ahern who made it possible for him to climb to the top in Hollywood. In the role of Jimmy Bryce in The Last of the Marx Brothers writers, it was his last performance in a play at the Old Globe Theater ever again. It was 21 years ago when he played in Volpone and winning the Best Actor Atlas Globe Award in 1956. It motivated him to become a professional actor in television and motion pictures. Victor Charles may have seen the restored Old Globe Theater after its tragic fire, but he never saw the first performance staged after it was rebuilt on January 8th, 1982, when they staged Shakespeare's As You Like It. He died 7 days before the Old Globe Theatre's triumph, comeback from the ashes, and he called the Old Globe Theatre as his true home. Victor Charles's ashes were entombed with his mother, Myrtle Bell Buono, at the Greenwood Memorial Park in San Diego, California. He rests there with his mother at Plot, Lily Lake Crypt 1, Tier A. They spent their whole lives together under their same roofs, and now they are together once again, forever. If my Uncle Victor Charles had an opportunity to describe his life, I believe he would say, "I did what I wanted, I loved whomever I fancied, and I'm gloriously happy to have died as an actor."